Hi everyone, here are my favourite 6 tips to help memorise lines fast. Tip number 1, read the script. I mean, well, yeah, of course. That sounds so straightforward and simple, but actually quite a few people, myself included, have been guilty of being given the script. You're so excited to start learning the lines that you just forget about reading it properly and just go straight into the trying to learn it and then getting frustrated because it's not going in. First things first, be kind to yourself, read it and enjoy reading it. Find out what is going on. Who are these characters? What are they saying? Why are they saying what they're saying? Take it all in. So firstly, just read it quietly to yourself. Secondly, read it out loud whilst you're looking at the script. And then thirdly, take the script, put it down, and then imagine someone has just said to you, oh, you're reading a script. What are you reading? Oh, I'm reading a scene from Blood Brothers. Oh, right, well, what's the scene about? Well, it's about dum-da-dum-da-dum. Think, who are the characters? What are they talking about? And perhaps why are they saying what they're saying? So if I was going to give a very quick summary of the scene that we're going to be looking at from Blood Brothers, I would say it's a scene that takes place between Mrs. Johnston and Mrs. Lyons. That's our who, our 2 characters. Bit more information about the who. Mrs. Johnston comes from a quite impoverished council estate. She has a lot of children and very little money with which to feed them. She works for Mrs. Lyons, who is seen as a well-to-do character with a lot of money, who has a lovely big house that Mrs. Johnston cleans for her. So that's our who. Then we look at the what. What's happening in this scene? In this scene, Mrs. Johnston is very upset. She's talking to Mrs. Lyons, telling her that she's just found out that she's pregnant with twins and she can't afford them. And the welfare are already threatening to take away the kids she already has. What then happens is Mrs. Lyons says, well, why don't you give one of the babies to me? So that's our who, the 2 characters, the what the scene's about, and then perhaps look at the why. Why are they saying what they're saying? Well, with Mrs. Johnston, she's upset because she can't afford to pay for milk, so she definitely can't afford 2 more mouths to feed. Mrs. Lyons is saying what she's saying because she is desperate for a baby and has not been able to have one. So she is trying to convince Mrs. Johnston to give one of the twins up. Simple summary, it does not involve me knowing the lines at all. At this stage, I wouldn't be able to recite the lines, but at this stage, I can tell you who the characters are, what is happening, and why is happening. So we're already very much on our way. On to the next bit. Step number 2. Write the scene down and then separate the scene into bite-sized chunks. Take the copy of the script and then write it out yourself. You can use a pen or you could type it yourself, but basically you are taking it from the book that it's in and making your own version of it. Firstly, when you're looking at a script, sometimes you might just not like the way the font has been presented. It might be too small, it might have strange spacing, it might be too dark, it might be too light. There could be many reasons that when you're looking at it on the page, it just doesn't feel comfortable. Here's the original version of the script from Blood Brothers. And here is my version of it. Same script, I haven't changed the lines, but I've just typed it out myself in a font that I like, that I will find easier to learn. And also, when you're reading a text, you actually read a lot faster than you write. So by taking the time to write the lines out, it really gives your brain some time to absorb these words. What are these words? You're not skimming it, you're taking that time to write it out or to type it out. It's another really good step to help you get those lines into your brain. The second part of this is to then break the scene up into manageable bite-sized chunks. So rather than looking at the whole thing and all the words in one go, which can be just a brain overwhelm and overload, make life easier on yourself. Look at that script and then think, where could I put a line underneath certain sections to divide it up? The way you divide it up might be completely different to how somebody else does it, and that doesn't matter. This is your version of it that will work for you. So some good ways to break a text up are to look for shifts in subject, shifts in mood, or perhaps when another character enters the scene. So in this scene between Mrs. Johnston and Mrs. Lyons, you can see my version of it. Here it is all in one big block. And here is my second version of it, where I have broken it down into two more manageable bite-sized chunks. In the first chunk, we have Mrs. Johnston telling Mrs. Lyons that she's pregnant with twins and she's very worried that she can't afford the mouths to feed that she has right now, so there's no way she can afford twins. That's my first section. My second section, where I created a new bite-sized chunk, was where Mrs. Lyons shifts the conversation and says to Mrs. Johnston, "Why don't you give one of the children to me?" So now, rather than looking at it in one fell swoop, we're looking at it in more manageable chunks. The next thing you can do as part of this exercise is to then just highlight your character's lines. You highlight the lines, look at it chunk by chunk, piece by piece, and already it's starting to become a lot more manageable. Tip number 3, record the lines. Get your phone and just record both lines, the lines from both of the characters. If you have a scene partner who can read the other lines for you, then that's brilliant. But if not, just record yourself reading those lines. It's really, really good to get yourself away from looking at the text constantly, because the more you read it, the more you trick your brain that you're familiar with it. But actually, that's all you are. You're only familiar with it. When you take that text away, it starts to become alien again. So this way, if you have it recorded, you can listen to it over and over and over, and it's another nice way to start getting it into your head. The second part of this is just to record the other person's lines. So if in this scene you were playing Mrs. Johnston, you would take your recorder and you would just record Mrs. Lyons' lines. So you're basically becoming your scene partner. You record Mrs. Lyons' lines, and then you leave a gap, an empty gap, for when you would speak. Give one to me. Give one of them to me. Yes, yes. When are you due? Quickly, quickly, tell me, when are you due? July. And my husband doesn't get back until the middle of July. He need never guess. By doing this, you will have a scene partner in your pocket at all times. You can press play, you'll hear the other character's lines, and in those gaps, in those spaces where you were just whispering, you can then practice saying your character's lines. Repeat, 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 repeat. Tip number 4, writing the script out using the first letter of every word. Looking at this sentence here, the line reads, "I know it is, it's mad, but it's wonderful, it's perfect." This next technique involves you taking the first letter of every word and just writing the letters down, just the first letter. You need to include any punctuation, so full stops or commas, and you also need to include if that is a capital letter or not. So looking at this line again, I know it is, it's mad, but it's wonderful, it's perfect. Here is the version where I am just writing out the first letter of each word with those punctuation points. So rather than relying on an entire script, you now only have to look at a letter. You'll be amazed how quickly the brain makes the connection and those lines start to flow. People learn lines and people learn in various different ways. You have audio learners who learn best when they hear information. You have kinesthetic learners who learn better by actively getting a hands-on approach. Visual learners who learn best reading graphics or seeing images in front of them. Tip number 5, use your visual memory. This is a great exercise, coming up with images that you connect to the words, because it means every image that you come up with will be personal and truthful for you. And this will be great when you come to perform the piece, because already you're connecting those words to something that is yours. It makes the text your own. And that's where the fantastic acting comes in, because it's coming from a place of personal truth. We'll use these lines. I know it is, it's mad, but it's wonderful, it's perfect. For the first line, I know it is, I want to have a picture in my mind, I know it is. What's the key word in that sentence? I know. So when I think of the word I know, me personally, I go to a classic cartoon from my day, Pinky and the Brain, Brain, Brain. I think of the Brain character. He knows, he knows. So for the first line, I know it is, I will think of that image of his brain. The second line, it's mad. For me, when I think it's mad, again, going back to nostalgic cartoons, I think of Homer Simpson when he does an impression of Jack Nicholson in The Shining, and he pulls a very distinct face. It's ground into my brain. So when I think it's mad, I think of that picture of Homer Simpson. The next line, but it's wonderful. But it's wonderful. For me, the word but, I think of butter. I think of butter, or you could think of a butt. Let's go for butter. But it's wonderful. For me, when I think of the word wonderful, I think of a snapshot that my partner took of me on a beach when I was jumping for joy because we were having such an amazing time. So that is my image for wonderful. My image for it's perfect, I have an image in my head of geometrically pleasing flowers. And this is for me, this is my own personal imagery. It won't work for anyone else, those are my images. But when I think of them, already I've got them. I know it is, I'm thinking of the brain. It's mad, I'm thinking of Homer Simpson. But it's wonderful, butter, I'm thinking of butter. But it's wonderful, me jumping for joy. It's perfect, I'm thinking of the flora and fauna. Immediately those lines are in my head because I am assigning visual aids, my own visual aids, to make them resonate with me and my brain. A hack that one of my students did, which I thought was really, really impressive, he found reading and writing very difficult, but he was very, very confident on his mobile phone. So what he did when it came to assigning visual images to the lines is he actually recreated the script with emojis. And it came so naturally to him. So here is an example of that line. I know it is, it's mad, but it's wonderful, it's perfect. He created these for his text, and as a result, he had such a clear idea in his mind. It meant that once he'd picked all the emojis, he practically had the lines down in his head because he wasn't worrying about reading them anymore. He was just imagining and remembering these very specific images that really resonated with him. If you're a kinesthetic learner, so if you're someone who really needs to get hands-on and get physically in there in order for you to learn something, a really, really good tip is to come up with a sign language version of the script, just whilst you're learning it. And then through muscle memory, when you're creating whatever sign or physical shape that you've come up with, your brain will then associate the word with it. So a physical language that I might come up with for those lines could be, I know it is. It's mad. But, butter, but it's wonderful. It's perfect. Once you've got those signs, you can then take the words away and just practice the physical movements. By doing this, you will create a muscle memory. You are getting it into the body, into the bones, and then it'll be so much easier to repeat them. Tip number 6, time and location. You need to be kind with yourself. The time that you spend learning the lines, don't give yourself an enormous amount of time and think, right, I'm going to sit down and learn it in 3 hours. Go, go, go. It won't work. The brain can only process so much information, and then it will go into overload and overwhelm, and you will just get so irate with yourself. Be kind. Give yourselves, again, bite-sized chunks, small bite-sized chunks of time. Do it bit by bit. And also, don't just learn the lines in one set location. Take yourself off for a walk. Learn it when you're going to the bus, when you're going shopping. Learn it when you're getting ready in the morning, learn it in the shower, change the location up so you're not stuck and you only know it when you're sitting on your sofa. Because ultimately, when you're performing it, you're not going to be sitting on your sofa at home. So this will just free you up and it'll make it less likely that you'll have those brain blocks when it comes to performing it. So change your location, get yourself up and moving, don't just sit statically, and also do it in bite-sized chunks of time. 2 good times to really learn those lines and to get them in your brain: last thing at night and first thing in the morning. So just before you go to sleep, the last thing you do is go over those lines. Don't go over them and then get on your phone and go down a social media hole. Read those lines, practice those lines, do the signs for it, listen to the recording you've got, whatever process or stage that you're at, do that as the last thing you do before you close your eyes and go to sleep. Then first thing in the morning, before you go down the social media hole, before you check Facebook likes, Instagram, TikTok, blah, blah, don't do any of that. The first thing you do in the morning is go over your lines. Doing it last thing at night allows your subconscious to just take all those lines in whilst you're asleep. And then first thing in the morning, you'll be amazed at how much is still there and you're able to recollect. Whew, hope that was helpful, guys. If you enjoyed the video, please don't forget to give it a and also, if you have any additional tips for learning lines, please put them in the comments below. Let's all learn from each other and share ideas. We're in it together. Thank you very much. I hope you're well, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.